It started when Melissa Carter moved into the new apartment. She wasn't superstitious, not the kind of person to think much about bad omens or energy, but something about the place felt off from the moment she stepped in. Not eerie in an obvious way. There were no flickering lights or creepy noises, but a quiet kind of wrong, like a song playing slightly out of tune in the background of her mind. The apartment was in a decent neighborhood just outside Portland, Oregon. It was an older building with creaky wooden floors, large windows, and a kind of radiator that banged like it was angry every winter night. Melissa was 28, newly single after a difficult breakup, and trying to start fresh. She worked remotely as a copywriter and liked the idea of having peace and solitude while rebuilding her life. The first few nights were normal. She unpacked, set up her desk by the window, bought houseplants she knew she would forget to water, and tried to feel like everything was okay. But by the end of the first week, something changed. One night, she woke up paralyzed. It was around 3:40 a.m. when her eyes snapped open. Her bedroom was silent, still cloaked in shadows. Her body refused to move, arms, legs, everything heavy like stone. At first, she thought she was dreaming, but then the panic set in. Her chest rose and fell in shallow gasps. Her eyes darted across the ceiling, and she realized she was completely awake but unable to scream. That's when she saw it. A dark figure stood in the corner near the closet. She couldn't see its face, but its shape was human or close to human. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It just stood there, watching. She tried to scream, but only a muffled croak escaped her throat. Her body strained against the invisible force locking her down. The pressure on her chest intensified. She could feel it. Something heavy, suffocating, like a presence pressing down on her lungs. The figure remained still. Then it started walking toward her. Its movements were slow, deliberate. Each step echoed in her ears like thunder, even though the room remained dead quiet. As it approached the bed, Melissa felt a deep chill crawl over her skin. It leaned down until its face hovered inches from hers. All she could make out were empty sockets where its eyes should have been. Then, in an instant, it was gone. Melissa gasped, jerking upright in bed. The clock read 3:42 a.m. The room was empty. Her chest heaved, soaked in sweat. For several minutes she sat frozen, trying to convince herself it had been a dream, just a dream. But it hadn't felt like a dream. Over the next few days, Melissa researched sleep paralysis. She read articles in forums. Most sources describe it as a harmless condition where your brain wakes up before your body does, often accompanied by hallucinations. But that word, hallucinations, felt cheap, like it didn't cover what she had seen. Because when that thing leaned over her, she didn't just see it, she felt it, smelled it. The room had reeked of damp earth and something metallic, like rusted blood. Determined to shake it off, she spent the next evening with her friend Grace. Grace was one of the few people Melissa trusted completely. She'd known her since college, and they had a habit of finishing each other's sentences. "You've been under a lot of stress," Grace said as they sipped wine on the couch. "New place, the breakup, working late. Your brain is probably just misfiring." Melissa nodded, even though she didn't believe it. "Sleep paralysis is common," Grace continued. "Lots of people experience the same thing. They wake up, can't move, and see shadow people. That's what they're called, shadow people. Creepy, right?" Melissa's wine paused halfway to her lips. "Wait, multiple people see the same figures?" Grace nodded. "It's a thing. You should check Reddit. Tons of stories about it." That night, Melissa didn't sleep. She stayed up reading post after post from strangers describing the same thing she had seen. Paralyzing fear, shadowy figures, the weight on their chest, the feeling of being watched. Some described it as demonic. Others said it felt ancient. A few even claimed the experiences got worse over time. The second episode came 4 nights later. She fell asleep around midnight. The dreams were strange, dark corridors, whispers in languages she didn't understand. Then came the pressure. Her eyes fluttered open, and once again, she couldn't move. This time, the shadow figure was sitting at the foot of her bed. Her body trembled internally, every nerve screaming for movement. The figure didn't make a sound, but she could feel it watching her. Its body looked less like smoke now, more defined, more solid. Its arms were long, too long, hanging past its knees. Then it crawled toward her. It moved in short, jerky motions, limbs bending in unnatural ways. Melissa screamed inside her mind, begging herself to wake up, to break free. The figure reached her chest, pressed its hands down, and whispered. She didn't understand the words, but they echoed in her skull, ancient and broken, like something long forgotten. The moment it touched her forehead, a high-pitched ringing filled her ears. Then she could move again. She sat up so violently she nearly fell out of bed. Her room was dark, silent, untouched. But something had changed. She could feel it inside her, like the presence had left something behind. The next day, she tried calling her mom. Her voice cracked on the phone, and she couldn't explain what she needed, just that something was wrong. Her mom offered to come visit, but Melissa said no. She couldn't explain it, but having people over felt dangerous, like it would spread somehow. That same evening, she found herself staring at her bedroom ceiling for hours. She didn't want to sleep, but eventually exhaustion won. When she closed her eyes, she dreamed of water, dark, still water. Something beneath the surface staring back at her. When she woke up this time, her body was free, but her chest burned like she'd been scratched. She ran to the mirror and pulled up her shirt. 3 thin red lines ran down from her collarbone to her ribs. They weren't bleeding, but they looked fresh. She took photos, convinced she'd finally lost it. But the marks were real. She hadn't scratched herself. She was sure of it. Melissa decided to set up a camera. She placed her phone on her desk with a flashlight facing her bed and used an app to record all night. When morning came, she watched the footage. Most of it was uneventful. Hours of her lying still, sometimes tossing, sometimes mumbling in her sleep. Then, around 3:39 a.m., the light flickered. For exactly 7 seconds, something moved across the frame. It wasn't clear. The figure seemed to glide across the far wall, tall, hunched, arms dragging. Then the light cut out completely. The phone restarted at 3:47 a.m., and Melissa was sleeping as if nothing happened. She dropped the phone. The figure had no face, but it turned toward the camera. She took the phone to Grace the next morning. "That's a glitch," Grace said, though her face had gone pale. "Some kind of shadow, probably just lighting." "Lighting doesn't move like that." Grace offered to let Melissa stay at her place for a few nights. Reluctantly, Melissa agreed. That evening, she packed a small overnight bag and left the apartment before the sun went down. As she stepped into Grace's cozy townhouse, she felt the tightness in her chest ease for the first time in days. But it followed her. That night, Melissa lay on the guest bed, grateful for the soft blankets and warmth of someone else nearby. She left the nightlight on and tried to listen to calm music. Around 3:35 a.m., she felt again. Her body froze. Eyes open. The room was dim, but she could still make out the walls. She tried to speak, to call Grace, but her lips barely parted. Something moved in the corner near the door, slow, deliberate. The shadow figure had followed her here. It didn't crawl this time. It floated. It moved through the air like smoke underwater, drifting toward her. Her heart pounded in her ears. Then, without warning, the door creaked open and a hallway light poured in. Grace stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. The moment her foot entered the room, Melissa shot up, gasping. The figure had vanished. "Are you okay?" Grace asked. Melissa broke down. They stayed up the rest of the night talking. Melissa described everything in detail. Grace listened quietly, her face troubled. Then she said something Melissa hadn't expected. "You're not the only one this has happened to." Melissa blinked. "What do you mean?" "I had sleep paralysis once," Grace said. "Back in college. Same kind of figure. It disappeared after a few nights. But I still remember the way it whispered. I never told anyone. I thought it was just me." Melissa stared at her. What if it's not just sleep paralysis? What if this thing is real? Grace didn't answer. She just looked at the nightlight and turned it back on. Melissa stayed with Grace for the next 3 nights. During that time, she didn't have another episode. She didn't wake up paralyzed, didn't see anything at the foot of the bed, didn't feel the pressure. For the first time in weeks, she slept through the night. It almost felt like it was over, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't. Every time she passed a mirror, she expected to see something behind her. Every time she blinked in a dark room, she waited for the figure to return. Even with Grace in the next room and the warmth of a guest blanket pulled up to her chin, she never really felt safe. On the fourth day, Grace had to leave town for a family event. Melissa had the option to stay there alone, but she couldn't do it. The thought of being in someone else's home, without them, made her uneasy. So, against her better judgment, she went back to her own apartment. The place felt colder than she remembered. Her plants had started to wilt, and there was a faint smell in the hallway, like damp wood and something older, something sour. She opened all the windows, turned on every light, and kept telling herself she was in control. She even lit candles, not because she believed they'd help, but because the scent of cinnamon and vanilla reminded her of fall in her childhood home. Safety, warmth, familiarity, but the silence pressed in anyway. That night, she left her phone's camera on again, but this time she positioned a second device, a small camcorder she borrowed from Grace, to record from the opposite corner of the room. She didn't want to rely on one angle anymore. She had to know what was happening. Melissa fell asleep at 12:08 a.m. The footage would later show her turning over a few times, mumbling, whispering in her sleep. At exactly 3:36 a.m., both cameras flickered. For nearly 20 seconds, static fuzzed across the screens. Then, for a split second, the camcorder caught something, the figure standing directly beside her bed. But this time, it wasn't alone. There was a second shadow. It was smaller, hunched, almost child-sized. It hovered near the foot of the bed, swaying side to side. The taller figure turned its head toward the camera, slowly, deliberately. Then everything went dark again. The video resumed at 3:49 a.m., with Melissa sleeping peacefully. She woke that morning with a start, feeling sore, her limbs stiff. When she checked the footage, her stomach dropped. She watched the shadows, watched them materialize and vanish. She didn't remember anything, but the pain in her shoulders told her something had pressed down on her again. That day, Melissa called in sick. She stayed on her couch, scrolling through sleep paralysis forums. For hours, she read about people who had seen multiple entities, how the experiences grew darker over time. Some had seen shadow families. Others heard names whispered to them, names they didn't know but couldn't forget. One post caught her eye. It was from a user named Nocturne_Trace. They wrote, "If you've seen more than one shadow, leave your home. It doesn't stay in your dreams. It's tethering to your space, your energy. The longer you stay, the deeper it roots. I left my apartment, burned everything I brought from there, and it still took years to stop seeing them. Get out now." Melissa closed her laptop. She wasn't ready to give up her home. Not yet. But something in that message stuck with her. The phrase, "it doesn't stay in your dreams," echoed in her head. That night, she didn't sleep in her bed. She pulled a blanket onto the couch in the living room, left the lights on, and curled up tightly with her phone clutched in her hand. She kept a bag packed by the door, just in case. But it didn't matter. At 3:34 a.m., she awoke with her eyes wide open and her body frozen. The couch was cold beneath her, and the apartment had gone silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that made her ears ring. Then the shadows came. Not from the hallway, not from the corners. This time they rose from the floor. Like smoke reversing itself, they formed beneath her coffee table, under the couch, behind the curtains. 3 of them, each one different. One tall, one small, one impossibly thin with long, jointless arms. She couldn't scream. Her eyes watered, chest rising and falling rapidly as they surrounded her. The tallest leaned close, its head tilted sideways. It didn't have a face, but she could feel its gaze. Then from its chest, it pulled something. At first, she thought it was reaching for her. But then she saw it, a black object hovering, spinning slowly in the air. It looked like a mask made of shadows, constantly shifting. It pressed it against her forehead. Whispers flooded her skull. Dozens of voices, all at once, all layered. Some screamed. Some cried. One, loudest of all, simply whispered, "You invited us." Melissa broke free with a gasp. She stumbled off the couch, knocking over a lamp, sending light crashing across the walls. The shadows vanished. She didn't sleep again. The next day, she did something she never thought she'd do. She went to a spiritualist. Her name was Denise, a middle-aged woman with a quiet demeanor and a reputation for helping people clear negative energy. Melissa found her through a local forum, and though she was skeptical, she had run out of options. Denise listened carefully as Melissa described everything, every episode, every shadow, every detail of the figures. She didn't scoff. She didn't question. When Melissa showed her the footage, Denise nodded slowly. "They're feeding on your paralysis," she said. "You're open, vulnerable, and they've become attached. They're not just dreams. They're lower spirits. Sometimes people call them night dwellers. I call them binders." Melissa frowned. Binders? They bind themselves to people during sleep paralysis. Most people shrug it off and forget, but some people, sensitive ones, keep attracting them. And when there's more than one, they anchor deeper. Melissa stared. "Can they be removed?" Denise didn't answer right away. She lit a small bundle of sage, began walking the perimeter of the apartment, murmuring under her breath. "This space is tainted," she said finally. "They've nested here. You can't just cleanse it. You need to leave. Pack what matters. Don't look back." Melissa felt cold all over. Isn't there another way? Denise placed the bundle in a bowl and met her eyes. "Maybe, but it's dangerous. If you challenge them, you risk pulling them closer." Melissa hesitated. "What if I confront them during paralysis?" Denise's eyes narrowed. "You'd better be prepared. Because if you fail, they won't just haunt you, they'll hollow you." That night, Melissa sat in bed with a journal in her lap. She'd made her decision. She couldn't run forever. If she left now, they might follow anyway. She needed to face them. She wrote a message in the journal. "Tonight, I face you. Come." She left the lights off, laid down, waited. Sleep took her like falling into a pit. She woke in darkness, paralyzed. Her eyes darted side to side. This time, there were no slow arrivals. The shadows were already there, 5 of them. They stood in a half circle around her bed. The air was freezing. Melissa focused. She repeated a phrase Denise had given her. "I do not belong to you. This is my body. This is my mind." Her chest tightened. One of the shadows stepped forward, its body convulsing like it was laughing without sound. Melissa tried again. "I am not yours. Leave me." The figure leaned close, and its form began to change. Its face twisted, shifting into her ex-boyfriend's face. Then her father's. Then Grace's. Each form whispered her name. Melissa closed her eyes. "You have no power here," she whispered. The moment she said it, something cracked. Not aloud, inside her mind. She opened her eyes. The figures were retreating. Their shapes broke apart like ash in the wind, peeling from existence. One by one, they dissolved. And for the first time since it began, Melissa could breathe again. She sat up, heart pounding, drenched in sweat. It was over, or so she thought. The next morning, Melissa checked her phone. There was a new video file. It hadn't been recording, or so she believed. But somehow, at 3:41 a.m., the phone had started on its own. The clip was short, just 5 seconds. It showed her sleeping. Then, from the ceiling, a single shadow leaned down and whispered something into her ear. Its voice was calm. Melissa didn't remember hearing anything in her sleep that night, but the message on the phone recording, "You made space for us," echoed in her mind the entire next day. She replayed the video again and again, examining every frame, looking for any glitch, any audio manipulation, any explanation. But it was there, clear as day, a dark shape descending from the ceiling like it had melted out of the plaster, whispering in her ear, "You made space for us." Melissa didn't go to work that day. She didn't eat much either. She just sat on the couch with the curtains drawn and the lights off, trying to understand what was happening to her. She had tried to confront them. She had spoken the words Denise gave her. She felt the pressure break, felt the shadows recoil. And still they came. She called Denise again. This time, Denise's tone was heavier, slower. She sounded different, almost afraid. "I think you've gone deeper than I realized," she said. This isn't just a binding now. You've opened a channel. Melissa gripped the phone tightly. What do you mean? They're not just visiting you anymore. They're living with you now. You may be seeing them during paralysis, but they're crossing the threshold. They're real, and they're tethering themselves to your energy. Melissa's mouth was dry. How do I stop it? You need to sever the invitation, Denise said. There's a ritual. It has to be done during an episode. But it's risky. If you fail... I don't care, Melissa interrupted. Just tell me. Denise hesitated, then said she'd email the instructions. She warned Melissa to follow them to the letter. No skipping steps. No hesitations. She also told her to write down the names of anyone she loved, anyone she wanted to protect, and place that paper under a glass of salt water beside her bed. The salt absorbs energy, Denise said. If they try to mimic those people again, it'll make them weaker. That night, Melissa followed every instruction. She cleaned the apartment with incense, placed obsidian stones in the corners of her room, dimmed the lights, and lay down with the journal open beside her. She had written 6 names: her mother, her father, Grace, and 3 close friends she hadn't spoken to in weeks. The saltwater glass glowed faintly in the candlelight. She whispered the first line of the ritual over and over. Then she waited. Sleep came more quickly than she expected, and so did the paralysis. When she opened her eyes, she was frozen. Her body locked tight, muscles numb, mouth dry. The room around her was bathed in blue shadows, and there was a faint crackling in the air, like distant static. The shadows came, but slower this time. They emerged from the walls, from behind the door, from under the bed, 5 in total, each of them the same one she had seen before. Their movements were smoother now, more fluid, and their forms were clearer. Not human, not animal, something ancient, shapes that made her mind ache just looking at them. Melissa focused. She repeated the words Denise gave her. Each word tasted bitter on her tongue, like ash and metal. I revoke my invitation. You are not mine, and I am not yours. Leave me. Release the space. The tallest shadow lunged. Melissa flinched, but couldn't move. Its face came within inches of hers, and for the first time, it spoke aloud. You called us. Its voice wasn't deep or terrifying. It was soft, like a breath through cold glass. Melissa's eyes welled up. She kept going. I cast you out. I break the bond. I name you uninvited. The smaller figure shrieked, a high-pitched whine like a teapot screaming. The edges of the room started to ripple. The shadows writhed, their forms glitching like broken video. Then the saltwater glass shattered. Melissa broke free at once. She sat up in bed, chest heaving. Her blanket was soaked. The candle was out. The paper with the names was gone. Just a wet smear remained. And her front door was wide open. She didn't remember unlocking it. Didn't remember getting up. But there it was, gaping into the hallway like a black mouth. She closed it slowly, every nerve in her body alert. That was the last night she spent in that apartment. By morning, she was gone. Melissa moved into a furnished sublet 2 towns over. It was a temporary rental, smaller, older, but she didn't care. She left all her belongings behind. Clothes, furniture, even her laptop. She only brought her phone, a backpack with essentials, and a camcorder. She slept the first night without incident. No paralysis, no shadows, no nightmares. The second night passed just as quietly. She began to hope again, to feel like she had closed the door, like maybe the ritual had worked. She even called Grace and apologized for disappearing. Grace was relieved to hear from her, though she admitted she had been having strange dreams ever since Melissa's last visit. Melissa's heart sank. What kind of dreams? She asked. Just weird ones, Grace said. There's a hallway, long and dark. I keep hearing someone whispering your name, but I can never find a voice. Melissa didn't tell her what that meant. Instead, she spent the next few days in isolation, afraid that if she saw anyone in person, it would somehow bring the shadows back. But after a week of peace, she let herself breathe. She turned the camcorder on one night, just for her own peace of mind. She fell asleep by 10:45 p.m. At 3:37 a.m., the camera caught something new. Not a shadow, not a figure, a mark. It appeared on the wall behind her bed, slowly, like ink bleeding into cloth. A swirling spiral of darkness, almost like a fingerprint. It pulsed once, then vanished. Melissa woke that morning feeling watched. There were no new scratches on her body, no signs of struggle, but she felt exhausted, as if she hadn't truly slept at all. The footage made her stomach twist. She called Denise again. "I think they marked the space," Melissa said, "even though I moved, even though I left everything behind." Denise was silent for a long time. Then she said something that made Melissa's blood run cold. "They weren't attached to your apartment. They were attached to you." Melissa stared at the floor. "You said I made space for them." "You did, but it wasn't physical space. It was inside you. Your trauma, your loneliness, the void you were trying to fill after breakup. That's what they crawled into. That's what they fed on." Melissa whispered, "So what do I do now?" "You need to starve them." Denise explained that the only way to drive them out permanently was to change the part of her that invited them in, the broken part, the hollow part. It wasn't about banishing them anymore. It was about healing the wound they had taken root in. It sounded like therapy. It sounded impossible. But Melissa had nothing else left to try. She started small, going outside, letting sunlight hit her skin again, talking to friends, listening to music. She stopped recording herself at night, stopped looking for signs, stopped feeding the obsession, and for a while it worked. Weeks passed. No paralysis, no figures, no voices. Then one afternoon, she got a package. No return address, just a small, square box left at her door. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single photograph. It showed her sleeping, curled up on her side, her hair sprawled across the pillow, her mouth slightly open. It wasn't a screen grab. It wasn't from any camera she owned. It was printed on glossy paper, old-fashioned, like from a disposable camera. On the back, in smeared ink, was one line: "You stopped watching." We didn't. Melissa dropped the photo and backed away from the door. Somewhere in the hallway, down past the stairwell, she swore she heard the sound of something breathing. Something that never forgot how to find her. Melissa stared at the photo lying on her living room floor. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up again, scanning every inch of the glossy surface. The angle of the shot, the slight grain in the image, the sharpness of her facial features. It wasn't a blurry image. It was close. Whoever, or whatever, had taken it had been just feet away. She checked her locks, her windows, her vents. Everything was sealed. There were no signs of forced entry. No one on the street outside. No package truck pulling away. Her breath came shallow and quick. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed with every light in the apartment turned on. She kept the television on a low volume and a baseball bat across her knees, as if it could protect her from something not of this world. But it didn't come that night, or the next, or the one after that. Melissa began to wonder if the photo had been a final message, a parting threat, a cruel reminder of what she'd escaped. Still, she couldn't get rid of it. She couldn't throw it away or burn it. She kept it tucked in a drawer beneath some old receipts, telling herself she'd deal with it when she was ready. Days turned into weeks. She started therapy, per Denise's suggestion. Real therapy. Human therapy. She'd talk about the breakup, the sense of loss that hollowed her out before the sleep paralysis began. Her therapist didn't talk about demons or shadows, just grief, memory, and healing. It helped. The nightmares became less frequent. The invisible pressure that once sat on her chest like a stone slowly lifted. For the first time in months, she started to feel like herself again. Then, on the 49th day, without a shadow, it happened. She was in her bedroom reading a book, just past midnight, when her vision began to blur. At first, she thought it was exhaustion. She blinked rapidly, rubbed her eyes, but the walls around her began to ripple. The air grew heavy and cold. The light bulb above her flickered twice. Then, all at once, it stopped. The apartment was quiet again, but she knew. She climbed out of bed slowly, every step deliberate. She didn't feel fear this time. She felt resolve. She had learned something in the silence. Whatever had once controlled her didn't have to anymore. She opened the drawer and took out the photo. And for the first time, she flipped it back over and stared. Only now it had changed. The photo no longer showed her sleeping. It showed a hallway, long, narrow, and unlit. At the end of it, barely visible in the darkness, was a figure. No face, no eyes, just a shape. And it was closer to the camera than before. Melissa blinked. She turned the photo over again. The ink that once read, "You stop watching," Whedon had smudged and warped. Now it simply said, "Open your eyes." A chill washed over her. She dropped the photo, backed away, her chest tightened. And then nothing. No shadow, no paralysis, just silence. It was almost worse. The next morning, she packed a bag again. This time, she didn't tell anyone where she was going. She left her phone behind. She took a bus 2 states over, rented a cabin deep in the woods where there was no Wi-Fi, no neighbors, and no noise. She bought notebooks and pencils and candles. She wasn't running. She was retreating. For clarity. The first few nights were peaceful. She started writing again, journaling, sketching things she remembered seeing. The long arms, the open mouths, the strange symbols she didn't understand but saw in dreams. It helped. It organized her thoughts. On the 6th night, she woke at 3:38 a.m. Not paralyzed, just awake. The cabin was quiet. Too quiet. Her ears rang from the absence of sound. She sat up in bed and looked toward the small hallway leading to the kitchen. The door was open. She didn't remember leaving it open. And in the darkness, barely visible, was a shape. Tall, still, watching. Melissa didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. She whispered, "I know you're not real." The shape didn't move. She stood slowly, each footstep deliberate, until she reached the threshold of the hallway. The shape remained, dark in the shadows, undefined but undeniable. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she said, louder now. The shape began to dissolve, as if hearing her words melted its structure. Its edges unraveled, and just before it disappeared entirely, it whispered something Melissa had never heard before. "Then why did you come here?" The hallway was empty. She slept soundly the rest of the night. The next day, Melissa made a decision. She was going to document everything, not just for herself, but for anyone else going through something similar. She began writing a blog under a pseudonym, detailing her sleep paralysis episodes, her encounters with the shadows, her conversations with Denise, even photos of the markings and broken glass. Within weeks, dozens of people reached out. Some had seen the same figures. Some described almost identical voices. Some had heard the exact phrase, "You made space for us." The blog exploded with followers. Hundreds of strangers who thought they were alone suddenly realized they weren't. But there was one message that chilled Melissa more than any other. It came from a user named Glassdoor37. The message read, "You broke the tether, but you left the door open. They walk through me now. Every night, I see what you saw, but I see them clearer. They said you belong to them, and that they're not done." Melissa didn't reply. She stared at the message, rereading it, feeling her stomach twist into knots. She clicked on the user's profile. There were no posts, no photo, no comments, just a single pinned journal entry. "I stopped dreaming. Now they dream through me." Melissa shut the laptop. Later that night, she returned to the small bathroom mirror in the cabin. She hadn't looked at her reflection for more than a few seconds and weeks, but something pulled her to it. She stared. Her face looked tired, older, but not broken. Then behind her, something moved, a flicker, a twitch in the corner of the glass. When she turned, the cabin was empty. But as she leaned in close to the mirror, she saw it, something just behind her eyes. A faint shadow coiled deep inside her reflection, watching, waiting, not gone, just patient. She whispered, "You can wait all you want. I'm not letting you in again." Her reflection smiled, but she didn't.